Let's begin by adding some theming, colors, and styles to our app. But first of all, I want to address why you would do this by looking at some current apps. So first I have AccuWeather for the iPhone, and I'm just on the App Store and I'm looking at it, and to me, it's kind of cluttered and there isn't really a consistent theme. Sometimes there's orange, which is the AccuWeather sort of logo, but there's also a different color orange on the screen, which doesn't quite seem to fit. So maybe they should have used the Adobe color wheel like I recommended. What else have we got? We have BBC Weather. Now you can see here that clearly there is a color scheme going on. The colors do not clash, they're somewhat complementary to each other, and it makes for a very easy and relaxed viewing experience. And you can see that by the number of customer ratings that they've got, and they're sitting at 4.5 stars, despite all of the people out there that seem to spend their lives giving people 1 star. Trust me, you'll come across them. Finally, however, there is also this Yahoo Weather, which looks fantastic to me. I mean, they've used color very judiciously. It's mostly white, and they've only used color to denote sunshine and rain, really. Everything else is plain white and laid out well. And I really, really like the look of this app. So that was just a quick reminder to you as to why styling and theming are so important. So it's worth spending quite a lot of time here. Let's create a basic app that includes a login name, entry, password entry, and a submit button. And once we've created those GUI elements, we'll move on to theming them. Along the way, we're obviously going to learn all about a few more GUI elements, as well as the theming side. So open up your editor, and I'm using the project we created at the start of this module. Go to your home.html, and let's get rid of this Ion card. We don't need this anymore. Now, we are going to create a small list of items. So let's start with the Ion-list component. And let's close the tag off. Then let's create some space between these two and indent this in because I like looking at neat code. So this creates a list of things, stacks them, one on top of another. Let's create an Ion-item. And this is going to be an input text, but first I'm going to close my tag and then create some space for that one. And this Ion item is going to be an input. So let's create Ion-input. And what are we going to input? Well, it's a type of text. We're going to input a name into this box. We can assign a placeholder to this. So we can have placeholder, and we don't want aria, we just want plain old placeholder. And this is sort of the grayed out text that displays in the background, hinting at what we want our user to put in. So this would be something like user name. Then we close off that tag and close off the closing tag. Then let's create another item, Ion-item. Close off the tag. And this item is actually going to be a password entry. For example, if a user was logging in somewhere. So this is something you are definitely going to do at some point. Ion-input. And this type is going to be equal to password. And you'll notice there are different types here. These restrict what the input box does. So in password's case, it puts asterisks instead of showing everyone around what your password is. If we put something like telephone, it would give us the number pad. Or number, for example, email would give us the email keyboard from the phone. But we want password. And obviously, we want a placeholder, which is equal to password. And let's close off our Ion input. Right, we have our list of items. Let's add a button at the bottom of that list. And you should be used to doing this now. Create the button. We create our click event, which is equal to login. We haven't yet created this. And sorry, that login should be in quotes. But of course, we are going to create that in a little bit, if we have to. And then we need to give this a name, which would obviously be something like login. Right, so we've created our button and entry. Let's see what that looks like. That actually looks pretty nice to me. I like this username and password thing. And watch what happens if I type in a name. We get plain text. But a password, you cannot see. And it's the same on both platforms. Right, so that is that part done. But rather annoyingly, this button to log in isn't centered. And that really annoys me. I've got a bit of OCD when it comes to that kind of thing. So let's use our styles to center that button. Now, centering's a hot topic amongst web developers. There's always billions of ways to do things, and centering seems to be no exception to that rule. So I'm going to center this button by actually placing it outside of this list. So I'm going to cut it. Whoops. I'm going to select it. I'm going to Control or Command exit and just put it below there. Then I'm going to surround it with a div. So let's create a div. And this div is going to have a class which is equal to button-center. So I know what that class is definitely going to do. And then, of course, don't forget to close off our button with our /div. So let's save that. And obviously, when this reloads, it won't be centered because we haven't created that class. So for now, let's put this button center inside our home.scss. So underneath home, let's have a .button-center. Open our curly brace and let's give it some style. Let's have a margin of 0 at the top and bottom and auto at the sides. So this will center it. Then let's have a text align, which will be center. Save that, go back over, and there we go. We have our element inside of the div aligned to the center. And that center will be the center of the containing div, which is in essence the screen for us. Now, we can add a width to this button to make it look a little bit better. So inside of that class, or rather not that class, let's create a button class. So I can override that by typing button, open my braces, and I can give that a width of 70%, for example. And that should expand it nicely. So now it looks a little more modern and a little more user-friendly. Okay, so I'm not going to create any button click events for this. I just want to concentrate on the theming. And there we can see it. Now, the reason I've put these inside of this home is because they're things I'm not likely to use outside of this. I wouldn't want all of my buttons to be 70% width because I'm going to vary them wherever I am in my app. I also wouldn't want all of them to be centered. However, this button center is something you might store outside of here. So where would I put this if I wanted to access it everywhere? Well, I'm going to cut this away from here, save this file, and then put it into my theme app.core.scss. And I'm going to have a .button center. And I'm not going to save this yet. I'm going to go over and look and notice how the button has defaulted over there because this button center doesn't exist. I'm going to save this, watch this reload, and our button should pick it up eventually, perhaps. There we go. And it has centered itself. So a button centering or an element centering I might want to include in a global manner. And of course, it goes without saying if you're a web developer, all the traditional CSS still applies here. Okay, I'll just summarize what we have done in this lesson. First, we created some new elements in our home HTML. We created a list with some items that allowed input. We also created our familiar class of a button. And then inside of our home SCSS, we created some of these button variables or CSS classes that we overrode and changed our width of our button. We finally centered our button by using a global CSS class inside the app core file.